This is the most evil man in Indiana. Joseph Edward Corcoran was 16 years old when his parents, Jack and Catherine Corcoran, were shot and killed in April 1992. Joseph was arrested for their murders. Authorities believed he killed his parents because they were too strict. He went to trial, facing life in prison, but he was acquitted. The jury didn't believe there was enough evidence. His family believed in his innocence and stuck by him. By 1997, he, his brother James, his sister Kelly Nieto, and her fiancé Robert Turner were all living together. On July 26, 1997, Timothy Bricker and Doug Stillwell were visiting James. Joseph believed they were talking negatively about him, so he confronted them. He knew he was about to kill, so he took his 7-year-old niece upstairs before returning to kill his brother along with Turner, Bricker, and Stillwell. After the quadruple murder, he went to a neighbor and asked them to call authorities. He turned himself in when police arrived at the scene. When police searched his room, they found 30 guns, explosives, and books on military tactics. Prosecutors offered Corcoran the opportunity to plead guilty to the 4 murders and serve life without parole, but he declined the offer. He went to trial and claimed insanity, but he was forced to withdraw his claims after court-appointed doctors ruled he was not insane. A jury of his peers convicted him of 4 counts of murder and sentenced him to death. He is expected to be executed on December 18, 2024.
There is a conspiracy that anytime Kim Jong-un leaves North Korea, he shits in a portable toilet because he doesn't want the CIA officials or whatever intelligence agencies in the countries he's in to collect his poop. Because through poop, you can get a lot of stuff like DNA, potential diseases, health conditions. So he shits in a portable toilet and has his staff get rid of his shit. So, the man, the myth, the legend. Kim Jong-un. A man who bans jeans because they're the epitome of Western ideology. A man who only allows 10 hairstyles for men. Did you know that? Here are your you go to a barber shop in North Korea, there's 10 pictures. You pick one. It's giving Sims from 2001. You get 10 hairstyles, that's it. Only 28 haircuts are allowed in North Korea. 10 for men, 18 for women.
Did you see one you liked though?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I did. I'll circle the one I like, guys. Yeah, that's the one I think I would get. Yeah, guys, leave it in the comments which number you would get. Wait, I feel like this is highly inappropriate, but I do want to know. Okay. What happens if men lose hair?
What happens if a man lose hair?
Yeah. Have you ever seen a bald North Korean before? Exactly. Bald is not an option. It's not one of the 10.
Mount Shasta is California's tallest volcano and a place of legendary spiritual power. But dozens of unusual deaths and disappearances dating back a century cast a shadow of uncertainty. Despite warnings from his family and tribe, Jack decides to venture into the forbidden zone.
Me and my girlfriend, we was up there camping out, and we were camping in a spot just right above the tree line. And I was going, well, you know, maybe we should move down a little bit. And she was like, no, we're fine right here. And so I was sitting outside and looked up on the hill. And here's these 2 big, gigantic people standing there. I said, you need to come out here and take a look at this. And so she came out and she looked at it and her mouth just dropped wide open. She was going, oh my God. It was something like you got scared.
New Earth update just dropped. We're getting another moon. And yes, this is 100% real. Starting September 29th, 2024, for at least 2 months, our planet will have an extra moon. Last month, scientists discovered something peculiar in space heading towards us. An asteroid about 10 meters in diameter paying us a visit from our solar system's Arjuna asteroid belt. And it's gonna join our moon in orbit for a little while, known as a NEO, a near-Earth object. Called 2024 PT5, it's gonna complete almost a full orbit around us, doing a loop-de-loop over the course course of 2 months, officially making it a temporary moon by definition, before getting launched back out and the sun's gravity takes over its orbital path again, as it was going a little too fast for Earth to fully capture it for good. Now, before you get all excited for a potential twin moon night sky, a reminder that this thing is about the length of a school bus. And no, not the short bus that I usually ride, a full-length school bus, which means it's going to be too small for anyone to see with the naked eye and even amateur telescopes. Yeah, you're going to need one of these hefty bad boys to see it. Anyone got one they could spare? As for the rest of us, we're just going to have to trust NASA that it really is up there when it arrives. Do you really think it is an asteroid, or maybe an alien spaceship doing some recon on us? Or is it a little too convenient that none of us are even going to be able to see it?
Did you know there was a Christian spin-off of the Saw movies called The Reconciler? In the Saw movies, the only way to escape death through these torture machines are to basically either confess what you did wrong or to perform some sort of bodily harm to yourself. But in The Reconciler, redemption is the only way out. In the Christian Saw movie, basically all of these people are being kidnapped and they wake up in abandoned warehouses and abandoned places in the middle of the woods, which again is very Saw-like. The characters even have to solve puzzles and figure things out in order to escape, which again, this is Saw, but Christian. Usually what they have to do when they solve the puzzle though is like find it within their hearts to forgive people who have wronged them, which is also very Saw adjacent when you think about it. I'm doing an episode where I talk about a bunch of Saw spin-off movies, and this is a really big one that I'm gonna have to force myself to watch. Slaw, The Taste of Death is another one that I'm going to be covering for you guys. The Saw franchise has inspired so many different films, and I cannot wait to go over all of them with you guys.
This lady was the definition of evil. In the year 1955, a group of 3 friends were on a road trip passing through a small Indiana town called Tulipville when their car's tire suddenly popped and they were forced to pull over. They quickly realized there was a small farmhouse in the distance and went there for help. Upon entering the property, they all thought it was odd at how many scarecrows there were and why they were so creepy. After knocking on the door, nobody answered, but they heard the sound of a sewing machine upstairs. One of the guys named Jeremy decided he would enter the home since the door was unlocked, but the other 2 guys decided to head back to the car. After about an hour of waiting in the car, they decided they were going back to check on Jeremy because it was now getting dark outside. But while they were heading back, they saw a scarecrow in the distance that resembled the likeness of Jeremy, and they found it peculiar. This time the guys didn't knock and went right upstairs towards the sewing sound. But when they opened the door, they were shocked to see a creepy, inhuman-looking woman, and she looked just as shocked to see them. She would then faintly say, "Are you looking for your friend?" And the guys replied saying, "Yes, where is he?" And then she said, "I believe he's in the backyard with the others." Frightened by this answer, the guys ran out the house without looking back and ended up running 30 miles on foot to the nearest town and went to the police station. That same day, they ended up raiding the home, but the creepy lady was nowhere to be seen, and they discovered the scarecrows were a little bit too realistic.
This story comes from Mexico, del municipio de Maucalpan. This lady says that there was a rumor around her neighborhood that every time there was a newborn baby, a turkey would appear out of nowhere, but it wasn't just like a regular sized turkey, it was huge. She says that some people claim to have seen that big ass turkey on the roof of people's houses. The people who would come to see that turkey would go to whoever the parents were who just had the baby and warn them that they think that a witch was gonna come and try to take the baby. The girl admits that she always thought they were rumors,
rumors, theories, myths, crazy things until she became pregnant herself. So she has a healthy baby. She comes home, and 2 days after the baby is at home, around midnight, she starts to hear like a lady crying outside. She kind of goes to the window like to hear if she's listening to this correctly. And yeah, there was a lady that was crying outside like she was in pain. And because she doesn't live in that house by herself, her uncles live like in another part of the house, she gets a phone call from one of her uncles. When she answers the phone, her uncle's like, hey, are you hearing this lady crying outside? And she's like, yeah, actually, my baby won't stop crying either. And that's when her uncle's like, do not go outside. It could be the witch that's surrounding the house. She said after about 10 minutes, the crying stopped outside, the baby stopped crying, and she didn't hear it again. However, the next 4 days would be the same. Around midnight, she would hear a lady crying outside, her baby would cry, and about 10 minutes, everything would stop. So on the 5th day, her husband finally heard this lady crying outside, because when she would explain it to him, he wouldn't believe it. So when he heard that cry, he walked outside and screamed at the lady and was like, what do you want? Why are you crying? You need to get the fuck out of here. What the fuck happened to my cheek? Did I hurt myself? Am I crazy? I don't think I had that in the beginning. I watched the video back. Am I crazy? It progressively started like appearing. Anyway, so after that day, they decided to put scissors in the form of a cross underneath the baby's crib. And it actually worked because they hadn't heard that crying of the witch after that. So 3 years pass and she has her second baby girl. And the day that she brings the baby to the house, it was already nighttime and it was time to go to bed. As she's laying in bed trying to go to sleep, she starts to feel that dreadful feeling, almost like you're about to go into sleep paralysis. She said that she also started feeling so scared, like nothing had happened for her to feel that scared. She tries to like turn around, and when she does, she almost sees like a shadow at the foot of her bed. She says as she continues to look at the shadow, it starts to form into like a person. In that moment, she starts to remember what had happened to her 3 years ago with her firstborn child. Somehow she manages to scream for her husband, and when he gets up, that shadow just disappears. The following morning, a neighbor actually visits her at her house, and she tells her that she saw a witch circling the neighborhood. She also tells her that she saw when the witch got on the roof of the lady's house, the one with the second born, and she tells her, please take care of your baby. Her neighbor didn't actually come empty-handed. She brought her cured tobacco, and she explained to her that she puts that around her house to like stop bad entities from like trying to come in. She explains that she put the cured tobacco all over her house, and again put the scissors and a sign of a cross near the baby's crib, and thankfully they have not heard that witch again.
This new found footage horror movie terrified me, and you are going to love it. My name is Chris, this is Big Fat Cult, and here is my spoiler-free review of what happened to Dorothy Bell. Let's go. Revolving around a student looking for information into what happened to her grandma after a bizarre and violent outburst, this is packed full of inventive scares, great fleshed out characters, and a very creepy and uncomfortable tone throughout. This isn't your usual standard shaky cam stuff though, this is mostly documentary style, with some nice shots and lighting, and we also see some webcam footage, CCTV, and other formats that stop it becoming repetitive or boring. The cast are really good, giving understated performances, and the dialogue is naturalistic. Asia Meadows is fantastic as Ozzy, a student struggling with her mental health and on a deep dive into her past. A quiet and insular character that you really feel for and want to go on this journey with. This film gave me proper chills, as well as some real shocks, jumps and moments of hiding behind my hands, and that is when I know a horror has truly got to me. Writer-director Danny Villanueva Jr. has created an interesting, scary, unpredictable film with elements of true crime and mystery, and has managed to make an originally creepy movie that will keep you on your toes. What Happened to Dorothy Bell is currently playing festivals and will be hitting streaming platforms very soon. Make sure to like and follow me for all the latest updates on this, as well as all things movies, TV, horror and pop culture. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Bye for now.
At 42 years old, Caroline's life is perfect. Her life is genuinely very mundane is how she describes it, until she finds out that her mom is an SA victim of over at least 50 men, and her dad is the main perpetrator. Caroline's brothers are alerted. All three of them, they rush to meet up with Giselle and take her away from this small little mountain town. Together, they go to the police station, and the siblings are old. They're all adults, and they're informed. Your father has been drugging your mother regularly for at least 8 years to essay her. He filmed her and posted some images on the internet. Since September 2013, he has invited out at least 53 individuals to abuse your unconscious mother. He posted photos of her to bait them and shared his fantasies. He did not request financial compensation. That means he was acting then purely for his own pleasure. Caroline said she had to know. She asked the detective sitting there and she's like, I don't even know if I want to know the answer to this. Did my father show any remorse for my mother, for his children, his grandchildren, for betraying his whole family like this? No. Your father simply thanked us for taking the weight off his shoulders. Caroline and her siblings, they leave the police station. They're fuming. But right when they get to their parents' house, because Dominique is already detained at this point, so he's not there, they're trying to help Giselle pack her things, trying to leave. Caroline gets a call from the police officers. Hello? They tell her that she needs to come back to the police station. Well, surely it can wait till tomorrow. No, it cannot. And she remembers checking the clock. 5:25 p.m. The kitchen microwave was singed into her brain and she knew that this was an omen. This can't be good. It only gets worse when she arrives at the police station with her little brother, Julian, fake name. They won't let her brother come into the room with her. He has to wait outside. She sits down in this interrogation room practically, and the officers show her these giant computer monitors with big blue folders, and the officer is oddly calm. He tells her, there is nothing that you cannot overcome in this life.
To the daughter?
Yeah. She's like, what are you talking about? I just need to know if you recognize yourself in any of these photos. He shows her a few images. He shows her the first photo. She's probably not even breathing at this point. It's of a woman in bed with her butt exposed. It's not her. It's not me. It's not me. Then another picture. It seems like the same brown-haired woman, but not the same bedroom, or the same pajamas, or even the same underwear. I'm sorry, I don't recognize her. The officer looks down, and they all kind of look at each other very uncomfortably. I'm sorry, ma'am, but could you look again? Do you not have the same brown spot on your cheek as the woman in these two pictures? What? She looks back at the photos and she says in that moment, tingling in her body, stars like spots prevent me from seeing clearly. My ears start buzzing. I go backwards. It's her. She didn't recognize herself because probably her brain and the trauma, and she's like, no, I refuse. But also, those aren't her clothes. That's not her underwear. She's been put into some sort of lingerie that is not hers. She cannot even, and she looks drugged. When the buzzing finally stops, Caroline looks up and nods. Yes, that's me in the photos. And she said she dropped to her knees and she became hysterical to the point where Julian had to come and pick her up. Soon afterwards, a folder would be found on Dominique's computer titled, Around My Daughter, Naked. It's just photos of his daughter naked, those two photos.
Listen, I'm fucking tired, but I have to get this video out. VHS Beyond absolutely fucking rips. I was at the world premiere last night at Fantastic Fest. Look, that's Kate Siegel. Like, I'm not even gonna lie, this is probably the best VHS that we've maybe ever had. It's especially a lot better than the last like 2 or 3 though, for sure. I'm pretty sure the entire row of horror talkers that were sitting next to me are fucking jaws were on the floor in the first segment. I was like, okay, I'm holding my breath because Ratman was really good and then that one went downhill. But then Justin Long's segment, Justin Long and his brother's segment came on. It's called Fur Babies. And let me tell you something. If you were anything like me and you love the movie Tusk, which is a goddamn fucking masterpiece, then for Justin Long and his brother's segment alone, you're gonna want to watch VHS Beyond. But yeah, massive step up for the VHS franchise. The last couple have just been there's been a couple of good segments here and there, but VHS Beyond legitimately is chock full of just absolute fucking bangers. You're gonna want to stream this October 4th on Shudder. Now I'm gonna go back to bed because I'm fucking tired.
A duende fell in love with my mom. When I heard this story, I immediately saved it. I have to share it with you guys. So this guy, when he was younger, remembers that a duende was in love with his mom. He explains that at a very, very young age, his mom would tell them, don't ever be alone with me in a room. This could be dangerous. But he also says that he would hear when his mom would be in a room by herself, almost like she was talking to somebody, but the other person's voice sounded weird and like out of this world. He explains that around around that time, he remembers when the duende gave a piece of paper to his mom and said it was a gift. When they all looked at the paper, it was the series of numbers, and he wanted the mom to play those numbers for the lottery. However, the mom did not play the lottery with those numbers. And the reason why she didn't play was because she recognized those numbers on the paper. He explains that the series of numbers were the dates of births of him, his brother, and his dad. So he says that the duende came back and asked the mom, hey, did you play those numbers? Are you rich? Do you have money? And obviously the mom was like, no, I didn't play the numbers. And that the duende got pissed off, like angry, and he was like, why didn't you play the numbers that I gave you? And the kid overheard when the mom was like, well, because it's weird. Why would you give me the numbers, but those are the dates of births of my family? And that the duende said, oh, they were gonna be the payment. They were gonna die because you were gonna win. What the fuck? Good for mom for not playing those numbers, because what the heck? I'm not gonna lie, I'm not sure how to pronounce Chucho el Catrin, I think, but this is where the story is in Spanish if you want to go listen to it. Knowing my dumbass, I would have played those numbers without even fucking realizing that they were my family's fucking dates of birth.
The moment that you take a poo in a new location is when you're comfortable in that location, but you're not comfortable before that. The reason I say that is because scientifically, dogs, to mark their territory and make themselves feel more powerful in their environment, more confident, they would take a in the grass. And you know when they like do the little rub thing with their feet? They go like this? Yeah. That's because they're marking their territory and they feel comfortable. Any location that you took in a dump in, after you've done it, even if it's in a public setting, do you not feel more confident in that environment?
Yeah, the first time I took a in like school, I was like, I can do this again.
I think it's
but I wouldn't want to.
You know in Minecraft where you set your respawn with a bed? It's like that. You take a dump and then boom, I claimed it.
For 30 years, she was only known as Tent Girl until an early internet sleuth discovered who she was. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Barbara Ann Hackman, who viewer discretion is advised. Pictured here is a man named Wilbur Riddle. Decades before this picture was taken, he was walking along U.S. Route 25 near Georgetown, Kentucky. He was scavenging for some kind of parts, glass insulator parts, I guess, when he stumbled across a large tent-type material just lying in the woods off the road. The material was like a large canvas, which was known back then, this type of material, to use to wrap up tents. When they opened this material, they found a decomposing human body of a female. This was on May 17th, 1968, and it was more than obvious that this was a case of a homicide. There was no identification on her, and this being 1968, you couldn't just like put fingerprints into a database and automatically find a person. DNA wasn't a thing back then. So really all they could do was put out composite drawings of the victim. And so this is that composite drawing. And they would only refer to her as Tent Girl. In 1971, she was laid to rest by the city, and she was given a grave marker that just said Tent Girl. And this was another composite drawing they did of her. But no one ever came forward to say they recognized the image. Initially, the coroner actually stated that this was the body of a young girl, aged between 16 and 19. Well, later they would find out that was incorrect. And it would take 30 years and the very early internet to finally find out who she was. So earlier I showed this photo of this is the man who found the body. Standing next to him is his son-in-law. His son-in-law is named Todd Matthews. Todd was married to Wilbur's daughter. Well, Todd said that Wilbur, this whole thing was just constantly aided him. You know, he found this body and they didn't know who she was. And it really tormented him, Wilbur. And so Todd wanted to see if he could do anything to kind of help ease that and also help find out who this girl was. And then when the internet became a common thing in households sometime in the 90s, Todd would use the internet to put out the information of Tent Girl. And he worked tirelessly trying to reach people, trying to find out anything he could with very limited information. This is early internet, well before you can pop a name into Google and you get 16,000 different, options. But he posted this photo, and then Todd also searched tirelessly through public records, public databases. He would scour like different websites that were talking about missing persons. And then he created his own website called Tent Girl. He put a lot of work into this. And finally, in 1998, after all of his work, he found a description of a missing woman from 1967. And this was posted on a missing persons website. And this was of a young woman who had just been married and she had an 8-month-old baby. And she disappeared in 1967 from Lexington, Kentucky, which was really close by where the body was found. So Todd contacts one of the family members who was involved in this missing persons case. He got a description of her and it matched the description of Tent Girl. The only difference is that this particular missing person was about 24 years old, so a little older than what the coroner initially determined. So the police in Kentucky got involved. They reached out to the family of this missing person, got the description, and confirmed that it was a very damn near match to who the body was. The missing person was Barbara Ann Hackman Taylor. She vanished in late 1967 from her home, but she shared with her husband and her 8-month-old baby. Now, they would find out that the husband never reported her missing. The husband would tell family that she ran off with another man, which they can confirm is not true because she was found dead, literally just right after she went missing. But eventually her own family members would report her missing. Now, obviously with this being in the late 60s, this is before there was easy widespread communication, no email, cell phones, text messaging. And so even though the body was only found 15 miles away from where she was living, there just wasn't that connection made for whatever reason. I can't say for certain why. But to confirm, they wanted to exhume Tent Girl's body. They did so in 1998. They were able to extract DNA from her remains. They took DNA from Barbara Hackman's family and confirmed that it was the body of Barbara Ann Hackman. And this is Todd pictured with her grave, which they have now given her her proper name. They've taken Taylor off of the name. And this is because police with 100% certainty believe that her killer was her husband. His name was George Earl Taylor. However, if he was her killer, he would never face justice because in October of 1987, George Taylor died of cancer. Barbara's daughter, who at that point is now a full-grown adult, they found her in Ohio. She had been living with family her whole life. She was now, married. She had her own kids. She never knew her mom. She was 8 months old when she was killed. But, at least she got some answers as to what actually happened to her mother. It's just sad that Barbara Hackman will not get the justice she rightfully deserves. But there is so much to say about this guy here, Todd Matthews. He's not a detective. He's not any kind of investigator. He was just your early prototype of an armchair detective, internet sleuth. The very beginning stages of the internet, he still managed to get all that work done and identify her. And honestly, he is kind of the unsung hero of this entire story.
This might be the scariest cult I've ever heard of. And what makes this cult so different from other cults is that the cult leader was actually a woman. And she actually believed that she was Jesus Christ reincarnated. And with Ann Hamilton Burns' cult, The Family, she stole 28 babies. Yep, this is a baby-stealing cult, and it's also the most infamous cult in all of Australia, and she was able to get away with all of it. We know very little about Ann's upbringing and her childhood, but what we do know is that she was the oldest of 7 children. She was raised without a father present in her life, and her mother was a paranoid schizophrenic who believed that she was a psychic medium and was sadly in and out of psychiatric hospitals for most of her life. When Ann was in her early 20s, she became obsessed with the idea of having the perfect family. That's where the cult name comes into play. She wanted tons of children, a lot of money. She was very vain, and image meant everything to her. She ended up getting married and having one biological child with her husband, but her and her husband had plans on adopting a baby. And you won't believe it, get this, the day that she was meant to go pick up her baby with her husband got in a car accident on the way to the adoption agency and died. And then the adoption agency pulled out of the adoption because it was the 1940s, 1950s, and was now a single mother. So Ann lost her husband and her new baby all in one day. In the 1960s is when Ann's cult began, and it actually started as a yoga class. I'm being dead ass. Ann got really into yoga and started teaching her own yoga class. All these wealthy women would attend Ann's yoga class and they became obsessed with her. Ann would tell these women that she was a psychic medium, that she was a psychic healer, that she had all of these spiritual abilities, that she was practicing practically immoral, and of course that she was Jesus Christ himself reincarnated. And the longer that this yoga class went on, the less it became about yoga and it became a cult. It was all about Aend and Aend's powers and her preaching about her spiritual abilities. And Aend had so much control over these women, so much in fact that she was able to convince them to leave their husbands and come join her family, which in the 1960s was very rare for a woman to leave her husband. But Aend wanted more members of her cult that, had power and influence in society, and in the 1960s, that was men. The first man to join Aend's cult was a very intelligent man. He was a doctor. He had a lot of influence, a lot of powerful connections, but he was also very gullible. His name was Dr. Johnson, and he truly 100% believed in Aend's spiritual powers and psychic abilities and the fact that she was Jesus Christ. And he was the one that was actually able to get all of these men to join Aend's cult. And these men, weren't schmucks. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were politicians, they were very wealthy and very powerful and very influential. And the original name of Aend's cult was, get this, the Great White Brotherhood, but they later changed the name to the Family. And the initiation ceremony into Aend's cult was literally terrifying. New members would be dosed with a large amount of psychedelics, and then they were put in a dark room for hours just by themselves while they're, tripping. And then Aend would appear. Aend would appear wearing long white robes with a single spotlight on her, and there'd be like smoke machine filling the dark room with all of this mist. And then Aend would, appear and introduce herself as Jesus Christ, and the members believed all of it. But probably the scariest part about Aend's cult is when she became the owner of her very own psychiatric hospital. One of Aend's members actually was the original owner of the psychiatric hospital, but when they passed away, they left it to Aend in their will. And what Aend was able to do with a psychiatric hospital is something straight out of my nightmares. Apparently, at this time in Australia, anyone could be committed to a psychiatric hospital against their will as long as 2 doctors signed off on it. And since Aend had complete control over all of these doctors, she could have anyone she wanted committed. Anyone that disagreed with her, got in her way, or tried to leave her cult. And these people would be tortured. They would get treatment, unnecessary treatment that they did not need. They would be put under like surgery and procedures, and sometimes even given frontal lobe lobotomies, literally drilled into their head just for getting in Aend's way. At one point, Aend falls in love with this man named Bill, and Bill was already married and had 4 children, but what does Aend do? She gets Bill's wife committed to the psychiatric hospital against her will, even though nothing was wrong with her, nothing was, wrong with her mental health or anything, and then was able to convince Bill to leave his wife, abandon his children, and then just marry Aend instead and join her family. And at this point, Aend's cult has grown a lot. It has over 500 members, and they're all incredibly wealthy. She was able to convince these people that she had complete control over to give her 10% of their yearly salary every single year. So 10% of 500 wealthy people's salary, and it made Aend a multi-millionaire. She bought houses all over the world, these big, beautiful mansions. She was traveling to the most beautiful places in the world, but she still was not happy. She wanted children. And this is the part of the story where Aend steals 28 babies. If a pregnant woman or a pregnant teenager was ever committed to Aend's hospital, sometimes committed, by force by Aend herself, she would have the doctors that she had control over deem the mother as unfit, and then once the woman, gave birth to a baby, she would have the doctors steal the baby and hand it over to Aend. And there was nothing that these women could do to stop Aend, but Aend did not stop there. When one of her cult members got pregnant, she would claim the baby as hers and steal their babies as well. And then she raised all 28 of these children as her own biological children. And you would hope with all the effort that Aend has gone through to steal all of these children that she would at least love them and take care of them, but you would be very wrong. These children from birth, I'm literally talking about newborns, were being tortured, abused, starved, and as young as 8 years old, Aend would have these children be by force to take a lot of psychedelic drugs, literally 8 years old on LSD. And Aend would rarely ever hurt the children with her own hands. She always kept her hands clean. she would have the other women cult members be the ones to hurt the children. And because she's so messed up and sick and twisted, she would often have the actual biological mothers abuse their own biological children. But it was all like discipline in Aend's eyes. The children and the literal newborns just had to be disciplined. By now, the cult has been operating for like 30 years, and the local people in the area are completely aware that there's a cult in their town. And then the media catches wind, and then the media is asking all these questions to Aend and the other cult members about what the heck is going on with the family. And at this point, it's the late 80s. Aend is in her 60s. The pressure starts to get to her, so she decides to just ditch Australia for a little bit and go spend some time at one of her many mansions that she has across the entire world until things start to blow over and die down. But with Aend gone, some of the older children begin to rebel, specifically the two oldest girls who were like 16 and 17 years old. They began sneaking out of the family compound, sneaking into town. They see, you know, what the real world is actually like. Imagine jumping straight into the 80s when you're being raised like, you know, the children of the frickin' corn this entire time. They start stealing food for some of the younger children because these children have been starved their entire life. They're so malnourished that some of them were unable to even walk. Then at one point, the two older girls just have enough and they go to the police and they just tell them everything. The police come to the family is raided, cult members are being arrested, some of them are losing their jobs, like these really influential politicians, lawyers, doctors are losing their jobs, or their reputations were ruined forever. And Aend's hospital that she had was finally shut down, and the people that she's pretty much had held a prisoner for years were finally released. Sadly, it took a really long time for them to even find Aend because she was just on the run. But when they did find her, they brought her back to Australia and then she was put on trial. But this is going to upset you guys so much because Aend always had her other cult members do all of the, you know, the things that were illegal. They could only charge her with 3 counts of fraud for forging 3 birth certificates of the children that she stole. And she got no prison time. She was fined. This multi-millionaire who's been a cult leader for, you know, 30 years, stole 28 babies, abused them, had all these people committed, were forcefully ordering frontal lobe lobotomies, and also has all these mansions because she's a multi-millionaire. They fined her only $5,000. And then she was free to go. You know, I start to get heated when I start to tell you guys a case, when I start stumbling over my words and I'm just like, you know, word vomiting all over the place. But with Aend's trial now over, guess what she does? She goes right back to being a cult leader. Yep, the cult continued after all of this. Aend never apologized. She never showed any remorse for any of the things that she ever did. She never even admitted to doing anything wrong. And she went on to live a very long, happy life as a multimillionaire cult leader with all of these mansions across the entire world until she died at 98 years old. I don't know a ton about what happened to the children. I do know they were freed and somehow were able to be raised together. They raised them all together in like a group home, which is really nice. But sadly, a lot of them had lifelong health issues and or lifelong trauma. And sadly, a lot of them ended up passing away very young. And if you're wondering what happened to the family cult after Aend died, well, it's still active today. Aend left all of her multi-million dollars to all of her members, and the cult is still active in a very tiny town outside of Melbourne, Australia. So if you live there or know anyone that lives there or plan on vacationing to Australia, just know that. Be aware of that. Alright, well that is this terrifying case. I don't think I've ever really talked about cults before, but they're super interesting, and maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper into some more cults. If there's one that you guys want me to talk about, let me know in the comments. I'm so sorry that I've been MIA for a couple days. I've had like the worst cold I've ever had in my entire life. I've been so sick, but I think there's something going wrong. So if you guys are also sick, let me know, but I'm starting to feel a little bit better, so I will be back tomorrow with another video, and I love you guys so much, and I will see you tomorrow.